This is a Zeiss Ikon Contina 2. This model was made in the 1950s and was my introduction to the Zeiss Ikon brand. I think it's a great little camera, and in this video I'll tell you why. In the early 2000s, I returned to photography in a more serious manner. I had fallen away from photography as career and job and family had taken precedent, but now all of a sudden I had a bit more time and a bit of disposable income, as they say, and I began to purchase a couple of cameras here and there. Up to that point, I really had only been exposed to, I had my Rolleiflex, little Rollie 35, and my two Nikon SLRs, an F2A and an FE. Moving back into the world of purely manual cameras, sort of like the Rollie 35 and the Rolleiflex. So let's talk a bit about the history of this camera. This camera was among the three introduced post-World War II. When Zeiss Ikon returned to camera production. I covered these in an earlier video. I wanted to take a closer look at this particular camera and why I really like it. What really sold me on the Zeiss Ikon brand was this photo that I took. Of course, that wasn't the only photo on the roll, but for various reasons, it was the one that really grabbed my eye and sold me on the brand. I should note that the photo that I'm showing here was taken with a Novar lens. So this model came either with a Novar, which is a triplet, or a Carl Zeiss branded Tessar, which would be considered the premium lens. Let's take a quick look around the camera and talk about some of its features. So on the front you have many different things going on here. This is your shutter release, so it's a front mounted shutter release, and although I don't really care for them, I really prefer to have the release up top here. This works well enough. This is your shutter tensioning lever. Here's your flash synchronization post, or post, I guess you could say. This little lever with the green dot is for switching between electronic flash and flash bulb synchronization. Moving to the top of the camera, you have your focusing ring. So this is a front cell focusing Tessar. In the earlier days, you had front cell focusing lenses, and that is in which the front cell moved to and fro in order to achieve focus. Unit focusing lens is in which the entire lens moves to and fro. And with most lenses today, they use unit focusing designs. This outer ring is used to set your shutter speeds. This is mated to a computer shutter. The other combination was a Pronto shutter. Sometimes they were branded Prontor, sometimes they were branded Pronto. I never really understood the difference, but in any case, they were simpler shutters with generally, for the most of its life, a slower top shutter speed. This one had speeds running from 1 second on up to 1/500th of a second, but like most computers, if you wanted to use that top speed of 1/500th, you really needed to set it before you tension the shutter. And the reason is that there's a coiled spring that's engaged, and so that's why you need to do that first. At the base of the lens is your aperture selector, and that's accomplished by turning this small serrated dial here. Apertures run from f2.8 to f22. So fairly wide range. On the top deck, you just have your film minder selector, and your choices really are color transparent or color negative, and black and white. You had different dials depending on which market this camera was intended for. So in this case, you have your speeds marked in ASA, and your distances are marked in feet. For the European market, these distances would be in meters, and this dial here would be DIN. This is how you focus your camera. This uses what's called an uncoupled rangefinder. So in the front, you'll notice you have 3 windows. You have a larger window, and then you have 2 smaller offsetting, similarly sized windows on either side. This uses a coincidence rangefinder, and so that means it's overlapping images, so you focus until the two images form one. Then you would read your distance and transfer that marking onto your lens. So if you, let's say you focus somewhere between 6 and 10 feet, but you were closer to 6 feet, you would then turn your lens until your pointer was roughly in the same position. On the back, you have two eyepieces, one for focusing, one for composing. So you would focus your shot using this small eyepiece, set your distance, compose your shot here, take your photo. Oh, tension your shutter, and then take your photo. Each one is a rather deliberate step, so that's how this camera operates. I never really minded it. It really forced me to think quite distinctly about every step. Not a bad thing. On the back, you just had your Zeiss Ikon branding. The edges, nothing remarkable here. You do have a couple of little strap lugs, eyelets for your strap lugs. On the bottom, this is where your frame counter dial is. Oh, this one has film in it. And so here's your film advance, here's your rewind, and this is your rewind button. So when you're ready to rewind the film, you press and hold this and crank. Let me grab another camera, and because I want to discuss this. This is a folding camera, which means there's a small door. When closed, the lens is both hidden and protected. You'll notice a small little silver or chrome, it's really a plug. Let me just say that right out. It's really a plug. When you remove it, this is how you attach your camera to a tripod. Often you'll see these cameras missing the plug because it's small, once removed, easily lost. So this camera doesn't have any film, so it's a good one to take a look at. You'll notice this one's a bit rough. It's lost the leather covering here. I do have some replacement leather, so I think I'll cut that and pop it in. Being a German camera, it has no foam seals to be concerned with. So in the back, you have a fairly traditional layout here. You have your pressure plate, and of course the role of the pressure plate is to keep the film flat against the film rail, so when you take your photo, your film will be as flat as possible. So taking a sharp photo is dependent upon two things, of course. The first being one, that your film lay as flat as possible across the film gates, and two, that the lens be capable of recording a sharp image. I also forgot to mention number three, that you have focused the lens correctly. Film runs from right to left. These small sprocket wheels serve three purposes. They do triple duty. One is they engage the film, of course. Number two, they also operate the frame counter. See that? And number three, this camera has double exposure prevention, so they also engage and disengage the exposure lock. Let me show you. So as I mentioned, you have to tension the shutter, which you do by pushing this toward the 12 o'clock position. And when you're ready to take your photo, you depress the shutter. Put this on a slightly quicker speed. Now you'll notice that even if you did tension the shutter, you cannot release it again because of the double exposure lock that's built into the camera. If you really wanted to, you could reach down here, this small little tab, and press that. Of course, you're circumventing the double exposure. So in the back, several things happen. One is, as you advance the film, it turns the sprocket wheels, and you'll see the frame counter advance as well. And it also locks your film advance. Once you take your photo, now your film advance knob can turn quite freely. And then, of course, these little sprocket gears can now turn freely as well until you advance to the next frame, and on and on. When you first load the film, you have to reset your frame counter manually. So you'll notice there's an arrow, so you simply use your finger to turn this in the direction of the arrow until you're at your load point, which is going to be at the diamond. There. Fire off 2 blanks, then the third time you advance the film, you'll be ready to take your first photo. As I mentioned, when it's time to rewind the film, you have to press and hold this rewind button while turning this knob. I've tended to use my left hand, the thumb on my left hand to, well, first I'll close the camera. I'll use the thumb on my left hand to depress that knob, and then I'll use my right hand to turn. You'll notice that this camera has lost its little tripod plug. This camera also needs a bit of work, so I'll do that at some point. So to open the lens door on a Contina, there's a small little post here. Push down on it, push toward the bottom of the camera, and just pull at the same time. Super simple. To fully open, you can actually just pull open the lens door till it clicks in place. To close it, there's these small tabs or ears, as I sometimes call them. Push inward on the serrated portion. Easier actually if you grab it near the top rather than down here. Push inward, door closes. Push it till it locks in place. And you'll notice that it cannot accidentally come out. This has a small accessory shoe. Obviously, this is not a traditional hot shoe. There is no electrical synchronization between this and the shutter. You would need to use a small cable to connect to your socket. If I wanted to use a filter, how would I go about that? Well, the filter thread is actually on the circumference or the outer edge of the lens. And so when you put that on, it screws to the outer edge. So how much does the Contina 2 weigh? Let's take a look. So the Contina 2 weighs 1 pound 3 ounces. Well, that's not a whole lot of weight. It lends to my statement about this being a very solid camera. Now, I invited a couple other cameras along for the ride, so let's see what they weigh. Here we have the Knobwind Retina 2. It also weighs 1 pound 3 ounces. So for the most part, identical to the Contina 2. This Contina 2 does have film. Let's take a look at see what it weighs without film, an empty camera. 1 pound 2.5 ounces. So the Contina 2 without film weighs 1 pound 2.5 ounces, and the Retina 2 without film weighs 1 pound 3 ounces. Finally, this is a good little camera for comparison. This is the Super Dolina 2. It also has an uncoupled rangefinder. This is going to weigh less, and I can tell you it's going to weigh less because I can feel it. That weighs 1 pound 1.5 ounces, so it's really just 1 ounce less. How could I feel the difference? I don't know, it just feels slightly lighter. This also uses much lighter weight materials. Top deck is much thinner. This lens plate is much thinner. Lens door is thinner. Everything about the camera just feels a bit less substantial. Doesn't mean it's less well made. It just means that there are fewer materials built into it. So for various reasons, this one, just being 1 pound 1 ounce heavier, does feel somewhat more substantial. So there you have it. The 3 cameras all weigh roughly the same. You're probably not going to notice when you carry them around. Not too much to carry on a day's outing. The Contina was introduced in 1952 and production ran through 1955, and certainly was available after that. What do I like about this camera today? Here in the 2000s, what I like is I like its compact size. I like the fact that it's a folding camera, easy to use. There's no muss and fuss about it. I like the fact that it has a very sharp Tessar lens. This is a coated lens, of course, being produced after World War II, and you can see the blue reflection in the lens. I think the controls are pretty much where they should be. I'm not, as you know, I'm not an overly big fan of the front-mounted shutter release. I tend to hold the camera like this. Actually, I got to curl my fingers out of the way because I do need space to put my hand. What do I think about the uncoupled rangefinder? Well, as long as it's been calibrated correctly, I've never had a problem with it. I think it works pretty well. You could actually just forego that and make your best guess. However, if you want to be most accurate, you're going to go ahead and use the uncoupled rangefinder. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain because you do have this window for focusing and and then transferring your distance from this to your lens and then taking your photo. But for me, it's not a big deal. As is common with most rangefinders, the close focus distance is just under 3 feet. That's actually a bit better than what you'll normally find. It's very common for the close focus of a rangefinder to be really about 3 feet and not less than 3 feet. So here you get a slight advantage. Maybe you get to about, I don't know, 20, well, 3 feet is 36 inches, so maybe you get to about 30 inches or so. I've never measured the actual distance. Maybe I will sometime. Probably not. My life isn't long enough to worry about such trivial things. This is a very well-made camera. Choice of materials is very high. Body covering is nice. Generally, you don't find many of these to be tarnished or rusted. For the most part, they've survived the years pretty well. Another thing I really like about this, I think this is sort of a handsome camera. It's an attractive camera. I like the design of it. It's very German, but it's not. It's not weird looking, I guess you could say. The Contessa is a little bit weird looking. It is something you'll grow to love, and I'll talk about that model in its own video in the future. It's very simple to slip into a bag. Obviously, it has no onboard meter, so you're going to need to bring along a handheld meter, which for me was never a big deal. Once you understand how to use the handheld meter, it's very quick. You never think about it. You just meter your scene, set your exposure, focus, and take your photo and be on your way. So that's my look at this camera, the Zeiss Ikon Contina 2. A nice camera from the early to mid 1950s, coming out of West Germany, or what was West Germany at the time. And a nice camera if you're looking to move into the so-called classic cameras. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if there's a camera that you'd like me to take a look at in a future video, let me know in the comments below or send me an email at contact@camera-talk.net. And see you on the next video.